Well, good evening to everyone. It's another Thursday and another live hour with TomPadula on TomPadulaTV. Yep, because I also have programs on YouTube and Channel 31 each week. So this is very special for me because I'm able to prepare myself about a subject that I am very passionate about, and that's history. Now, I've sort of organised myself a little bit better for this particular hour in that I will do the history part first, and then I'll do some Australian poetry, and I want to speak about Australia a little bit. And then I also want to, because I promised my friend Stephen Ross Ferraro, who plays music on and has his live shows here on Facebook as well during the week, that because I've been interested in Italian songs and the lyrics of songs, and I've noticed that a lot of people don't speak Italian, or their knowledge of the Italian grammar, etc., is can be improved. So I'll go through some of the songs. Each week I'll do a few songs. And this time I want people to actually practice the songs as well. So we'll see how it goes. It's a promise. But today's focus is still on early men because we looked at why we do history first. Then we went on in the second program. I spoke about the early living creatures on Earth from the very beginning, because the Earth came about. There's a Big Bang theory, they call it. It came from a Big Bang in the universe, and there are, of course, textbooks for history. There are also many beautiful programs on television relating to, visually about all these things. And of course, you always have YouTube, and you also got, Google everything. If you want to know something, you can look it up. But it's one thing looking at things, and it's another thing making it your own, and then trying to pass it on to other people as well. So this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it for myself primarily, but with you in mind. So if you are listening, I am very grateful that you come on. But if you don't come on tonight, you can also listen to this program during the week because the link goes on my Facebook page. And eventually also it'll be on Insegna.com on my business, because I'm in books, Insegna.com. And there's a little section there called blog. Under blog, you'll find the programs that I do now. So here we go. What's the time? Yeah, it's in 1 more minute and I'll be starting. We'll start from the Paleolithic Age. That is the old age of, when the world first began, sort of thing. But we don't really know the precise dates, of course, because it's guesswork, but it's archaeologists do a good job with carbon dating, etc. And the study of, if you study anthropology, it's another mix between biology and social sciences. So there are subject areas that are very important for learning about history. So here we go, the Paleolithic Age. So we'll start there as soon as I reach, there it is, 7:30. So here we go. In the Earth's forest, more than 1 million years ago, there were a few large creatures who had learnt to walk erect upon the ground. They were still rather ape-like in appearance, but the grunts with which they warned of danger or expressed satisfaction over a meal were becoming so varied and complex that they were beginning to make up a simple language. Now, that's, of course I'm using a few of my tools to explain this. This is the beginning of Homo Erectus, in other words, the very early the very early beginnings of men, more like they were hunted by the bigger animals around, because they lived outside with like all other animals. Eventually, when they stood up, they were able to actually use their hands for defense or for hunting eventually, and that was an important, well, not discovery, evolution. So evolution has a lot to do with the way we are today, and of course it's taken millions of years. But we're talking about a couple of million years ago with the Paleolithic Age, and it took many millions of another million or so years in order for men who was, physically weak in their environment. So here we go. Apart from this, they lived just as the other animals did. They hunted for food with their hands and feet and teeth. They went naked. They didn't have any clothes. They wandered wherever the search for game and wild berries and roots took them, curling up at night to sleep under a bush or a rock. They had no houses of any kind and no tools or weapons, not even a pointed stick. So they lived like all the other animals. They had not even armour like the rhinoceros, or fearsome fangs and claws like the sub-toothed tiger, or long curved tusks like the elephant, or the woolly mammoth that still roamed the forests. So when you compare early men, to other animals, well, quite weak. Besides these beasts, they seemed weak indeed. They must have more often been the hunted than the hunters. And what happens over time is that men, from being hunted, they become the hunters. It's a great development. And that's all got to do with standing up and growing a brain, a bigger brain than normal animals. Maybe we are still part of the animal world, but because of the growth in our brain, things have changed for us, especially over the last 10,000 years. Yet, these beings, scientists say, were becoming men. So slowly but surely, they were becoming men. Now, I've read somewhere else too that, there was the Java men about a million years before Christ. But we can say certainly that a primitive type of man did live then, a million years ago. In 1891, a Dutch teacher named Dubois found the fossilised bones of some of these early men in some million-year-old rocks in Java. Java man was not very much like a modern man to look at, but neither was he very much like an ape. His head shape was about halfway between that of a chimpanzee and that of a man. Because there are no stone implements in the fossil beds where Java men's skeletons have been found, most scientists assume that he must have used wooden implements. So the Java men was the early men. Now, looking at archaeologists, they use what they call radiocarbon dating. For example, as long as a plant or animal is alive, it takes up radioactive carbon, radiocarbon from the atmosphere, but begins to lose it when it dies. It will lose half of it in just over 5,500 years, and then another so about 11,000 years. But here we depend on knowing about early men more from the remains, the remains that are found in the ground, like their stone implements, etc. So let's have a look. History is the story of how this apparently defenseless creature has changed into man as he is today. What advantages had he a million years ago over the shark or the lion? So what are the advantages that he had? So basically, men over the many centuries in the early part, his brain grew. That was the most important thing for early men. Man's superior brain. Man could think, now thinking, and he used his brain to invent tools to help him procure his food. These two advantages were worth more than all the equipment of all the other animals put together. So if you think about it, if you've got a brain and you develop some tools, so you then start. You can defend yourself. You can plan what you're going to do. You can search for food, vegetables, etc., but also for meat. So you're killing other animals. In our own age, men's nearest relatives, the great apes, sometimes pick up a stick and use it to get food that would otherwise be out of their reach. So there are examples of early men in our animal world today. The earliest men probably used sticks and stones in this way far more often than even the cleverest chimpanzee today. But perhaps the greatest step towards full humanity was taken when a man of a primitive type first roughly shaped a stick to his requirements. So the most important thing that he got a stick and was able to put maybe a stone or use the stick initially. Okay, so then the inventions come in the brain. It was working something out. He may have sharpened the end of a stick by rubbing it on a rock so that it would make a more efficient tool for digging out wild roots. Or you may have stripped a short, heavy stick of leaves and branches to make a more efficient club. So these are the thoughts. These are some of the, a lot of the textbooks refer to these. And as I said, history is it's a very interesting subject. You can do history even in courses for adults or the University of the Third Age. You can, as long as you're interested, that is the main thing that is important. Of course, we shall never know his name, if he had one, or exactly when and where he lived. But this first and greatest inventor was the forefather of Edison and Marconi and the Wright brothers, and other luminaries, other inventors, most inventors. So the first inventions, like everything in life, when we first discover something for ourselves, and then we continue to use it. It's that moment is important. The moment when we are born from a sperm. Look at me now. So that's what happens. Over time, things grow and change, and the changes continue evermore. Man is the only tool-using animal, and it is the tools he has invented which have given him mastery over all the other animals and things of the earth. So the fact is that we use tools to make things, to help ourselves. That's what distinguishes us from animals in general. But, we said that sometimes the gorilla or the chimpanzee will use a stick. They're pretty clever too, but I look. There are a lot of pets now, dogs around. Some of them are pretty smart, honestly. They understand, but again, you need to think about what we are doing with our brain and what they are doing with their brain. So the respect for other beings is important because we come from there as well. Now, apart from this version of the beginning of time and the beginning of men, we have also the religious ones where it says men just came, from wherever, from outer space, whatever. So those are these are the considerations. For me, science and religion, etc., they're not. They can tango together. It's not because at the end of the day, whatever happened, even with the Big Bang Theory, it comes from somewhere. So God is everywhere. Where? And if you give it a name, you follow certain rules, well, then religion becomes important for you and for other people in the community, etc. Or if you don't, at least you have that sense of humanity, which is important. It's a philosophy. A good philosophy is important. And we'll get to that eventually as well. So man becomes a tool using animal. So what happens here? Perhaps it would be better to say man is an implement using animal, because implement is a convenient word that means tool or weapon, or even utensil. So tool, weapon, utensil. A jar made of pottery, for instance, can hardly be called a tool or a weapon, but it can be called an implement. For hundreds of thousands of years, spears and other implements were probably fashioned out of wood. We say probably because these wooden implements have rotted away long ago. We don't know. So that scientists can say only that the men of a million years ago must probably have lived with the help of simple wooden tools. So again, when you look back at history and you look at early men, we don't really know. Even with all our discoveries, and now, especially in the last 25, 30 years with computers, we are making huge progress now, more than ever before, because of the tools that have been developed over the last 50 years. It's amazing what we can do. And now we're looking at us going to the moon, to Mars. You know, you hear this, people are going out of space now for a holiday, as tourists. Wow, amazing. So let's go back to Java man. Java man is the early part, Java man. Now, the early human species, as I said, were animals, but then there was the great southern land, Australopithecus is called. Australopithecus is the Java man, the great southern lands. This, you know, historians give names, people write books, texts, you've got to come up with something. So Australopithecus is the southern man, people, the Java man, the Aborigines, etc., the indigenous of Australia, of Africa, of Asia, of Europe, all of them. And there was another, not so long ago, there was another fossil find, another find in China, and they found, they called it the Peking men, dating back to about 600,000 years before Christ. It is possibly about 600,000 years old and contains the fossilized skeletons of some more of our remote relatives. Though he had a better brain than Java man, Peking man might still be truthfully called a low brow. He was not at all the sort of chap you would like to invite home to dinner, especially as there is some reason to think that he ate meat, a cannibal, I don't know. If you ate meat, so if you, cannibalism means you can have meat, but not of, we look down upon eating another human being. So we don't mind that we're eating animal meat, but some, vegetarians they object to that too, because that's the objection is quite rightfully there too, because if we come from animals, then we should respect them as we do ourselves. So, but life is what it is. We have very different views about a lot of things, and even in our food habits. So this Peking man so you got the Java man, the Peking man, 600, and then about 100,000 years ago, you got the Homo Erectus, the standing up Homo Erectus who uses tools, who uses the implements and organises himself as well. Homo Erectus was like, they were able to capture animals, hunt them, etc. So that's what happens. And with Homo Erectus also, somehow they got fire. And once you get fire, from natural sources, lightning, etc., and then you learn that, if it's warm, it's hot, you can the animals get cooked, you taste and they taste better. So you learn these things as you go along. But again, let's look at hundreds or thousands of years from now on, from 100,000 years ago to now, because don't forget there was also all the big animals were still there. But then I've read somewhere here that there was the Great Ice Age when Earth became frozen, and all the lands sort of, you could go from Europe to Asia to Africa to Australia. It was all ice. So if you've got Ice Age for quite a while, a lot of the animals died, but men survived. So they would have died too, but somehow they survived. And then about 20,000 years ago, apparently the ice began to melt, and so from there we get the Neanderthal man. Neanderthal man, again found in France. Again, fossils, tools, metal, whatever they used. There are a lot of finds, especially now, the last few years. There are a lot of governments actually are investing in this. They want to find who's the earliest, etc. And, you become, let's face it, if you get a great find, it's good for the country because it attracts the tourists in. So let's go to the mastery of fire. First, he had mastered fire. Layers of ashes and other signs in the excavated cave show that although he had perhaps not learned how to make fire, he knew enough to keep it alight once he had got a burning stick from somewhere. So the Neolithic, now from Paleolithic we got to Neolithic, to the new way of the new age, the Stone Age. That's Neolithic, Stone Age. So we get men now becoming more numerous and in groups. So that's the Neolithic men. From about 25, to 10,000, 12,000 years after the Ice Age, became, warm. The earth warmed up again, and for example, the Aborigines, the indigenous of Australia, the indigenous people of Australia, could have come from Southeast Asia, could have come from Africa, people could have walked from the northern part of Australia to Bali and to Sumatra and to Indochina. So, and this is all possibilities. Again, if you look into the history part, the early part of men and the early part of Australia, you find that you cannot explain the presence of indigenous people in Australia because it's surrounded by water. So where do they come from? So this sort of scientific explanation is important. It gives it a reason. Like in the northern part of America, we always say that the Vikings, for example, from the northern part, they went from the North Pole into North America through Greenland, etc. So, the world is what it is. So the movements is possible, and if you've got intelligence and you create boats and you've got a sense of adventure, and we still have that, that takes you in other places. That's why we're going out in the universe now, into our, at least a few planets. That'll come. That's bound to come. So the uses of fire. So at first, people didn't know how to use fire, but then what happened? At first, men probably valued fire most as a means of keeping savage beasts at bay, and as a means of keeping warm and having light at night. Remember that men still had not thought of clothes. Even today, tribes of primitive, some of the primitive tribes, let's say in the Amazon, we're talking about the indigenous people here, etc. we've seen all those pictures. The people haven't used clothes, especially in warm weather. Why would you use clothes anyway if it's hot? Even today's but if you're in a cold place, you do need cover, and so you use animal skins or anything else for clothing. So picking men, the picking men, not 600,000 years ago, but maybe way closer to the Neanderthal age, up to this time, they used fire for hardening the points of his spears and digging sticks. Excavation in the cave shows that they also used it for cooking. So a lot of the archaeologists over the last 150 years have found in these caves that when I went to Vietnam, I went into some caves, yes, and obviously people could live in there. And they were safe. So if you had fire as well, you were protected at night from roaming animals. So which were the first stone tools? The second great advance shown by picking men was the working of stone. First hatchets or owlets found in his cave and others equally old from other parts of the world show that Stone Age had begun more than 500,000 years ago. Stone was beginning to replace wood as the main substance used by men to help him in food gathering. Eolith, comes from the Greek word meaning dawn and stone. So, the stones you find when you go to the beach, the round ones, especially the balls, they're good. You could hammer, you could chop, you could bore, cut and scrape with stone. So man makes fire perhaps about 250,000 years before Christ. Discoveries in other parts of the world, especially in lands surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, show us that as time went on, men slowly learned how to make more specialised and efficient stone implements. At about the same time, they discovered how to make fire. So you rub two sticks or whatever. That was, once they learned how to make fire, then that's a great advance as well. Because it's one thing to put a guard, looking after the fire for the night and keeping it stoked, and it's another thing when you can light it up anywhere you like. Now we're starting to come to in our areas now. In some parts of the world, especially in Europe and Egypt and a few parts, people have found stone knives, scrapers, borers, spearheads and axe heads have been dug out of gravel beds which were laid down by rivers as long as 250,000 years ago. So with these improved flint tools, men of Old Stone Age learned in time how to make new implements out of bone and ivory as well as out of wood and stone. So when they killed the animals, the big elephants and the big mammoth, they had the bones. So they learned that they could use those hard material to make even better and more useful tools. And then, because they gathered into a small village type of thing, they were protecting themselves from weather, etc. So they had barbed tips made of ivory or bone, made the hunter's spear more deadly, and towards the end of the Old Stone Age, bone spear throwers were invented, which greatly increased the range of these weapons. However, fine ivory needles have also been dug up, which show that by 25,000 years ago, men had learned to keep themselves warm and clothes made from animal skins. And some of the films that we watch, they show in the old, you see people with animal skins when it's cold. Perhaps the invention was speeded by the long period of intensely cold weather during the last ice age. So they're talking about the last ice age. We're talking about, again, this ice age finishing off about 20,000 years ago. when the polar ice cap came almost as far south as the Mediterranean. So, I'll just repeat, some of the Stone Age tools were the borer, knife, axe heads, spearhead, scrapers, arrowheads, and the knife. Bow and arrow, well, that's another one. In Spain and North Africa, there are scratches on the rocks, pitch almost as old as this, which show men hunting with bow and arrows, so we know that this important invention too was made before the end of the Paleolithic period. Paleolithic is a scientific name for Old Stone Age, so the Old Stone Age. Now, these are the caves. You know, we've got a lot of cave paintings in Australia as well, very important, because that shows us, that we can access knowledge from the past which is not in written form. But the most surprising achievement of these ancient hunters was their art. In Spain and France, especially in the village of Cro-Magnon, you may see today on the roofs of caves far under the mountainside large coloured paintings of bison and other game hunted by these ancestors of ours. These paintings were done about 30,000 years before Christ, more or less, and yet the colours are as fresh and glowing and the figures as lifelike as when they were new. Well, I haven't been there, have you? The best of them show an artistic skill and vigour which many great modern artists think equal to their own. In the dirt and rubbish on the floor of these caves have been found small stone saucers which must once have held animal fat and been used as lamps by the long-dead artists. So in the caves, men would protect himself, became their home, and they, made a home for themselves. We're almost there, and the last bit for this chapter is Paleolithic man remained a homeless, wandering hunter. This is the Neolithic age, the Stone Age, the one closer to us. They did not progress beyond, this wandering, living in caves and hunting and gathering, sort of very organised, but sort of subsistence living in a way. Yet with all these achievements, to his credit, Paleolithic man remained a wandering savage. I wouldn't call him a savage, I would just call him a wandering human. Well, a wandering person, whatever. All his days were spent in gathering wild roots, berries, fruits and birds' eggs, or in hunting animals for food. As at the beginning of the Paleolithic Age, so at the end of it, man was still purely a food gatherer like all the other creatures of the earth. You've got to survive. Even today, what do? We go to the supermarkets more often than anywhere else. Looking for food every day. And some people like it fresh. So his only house was a cave or a windbreak, such as the meres of our indigenous people here in Australia. And in Australia too. If you got to the gallery, I saw an Aboriginal hut, but I haven't seen much in terms of, where people lived when they were free and roaming around, wandering from place to place. While man remained a wanderer, the first steps towards civilization were impossible. So if you're a nomadic person, you can't stay in one spot. You can't progress to what we call civilization. In other words, you stay put, you have a house, etc., build roads. The Cro-Magnon men who made the cave paintings in France were true men. So these people here, the first men with the measurements of the skeleton show that mentally and physically they were practically indistinguishable from the men of today. Their paintings and carvings show that they must have felt about things in much the same way as we do. Vast indeed were the differences in these respects between them and the shambling ape men of 1 million before Christ, 1 million years before Christ, whose remains were discovered in Java. So we're talking about the Java man. what great progress was made in 1 million years. Now don't forget, we only know about ourselves for the last 10,000 years. Yet the difference in the amount of knowledge possessed by the two groups of men was very great. All the important discoveries and inventions on which civilization depends had still to be made. In time, we are very close comparatively to Cro-Magnon men and very, very far away from Java men and Peking men. So we've moved on from those old creatures, call them whatever, but the first humans, if you like. In knowledge, which is power, knowledge is power. What can a textbook writer do? Knowledge is power. It's true. Over the other things and creatures of the earth. Java men and Cro-Magnon men were very close, while we are very, very far ahead of both of them. So we are today hugely in front. And we have made, especially the last 120 years, we've made incredible advances. For example, again, I've read somewhere, you can check it out. I don't have the figures in front of me, that at the beginning of the 20th century, we were about 2 billion people on Earth. We are now 8 billion. At the time, some people couldn't eat properly. I mean, there was famine, etc. The Irish potato farmers in the 17th century, the people suffered even though the population was less. It was, humans always had this violent thing about them, and they had to suffer a lot of cruelty by nature itself, whether through earthquakes or tornadoes or whatever. And this is one of the things that we always fight. We fight against nature, really. We've got to protect ourselves against whatever happens in nature, including our pandemic. So the answers are out there somewhere. But that's what we do. We progress because we need to progress. It's in us, and our brains will. I've seen some films where, say, in the year 300,000 years from now, the brain becomes the whole most of the body, because you don't need to do, you only need the brain to control everything. Anyway, that's another thing. But I finished today on the early men, and you can study it. And of course, you can always come back to me for a little revision. And as I said, it's really up to you. I'm just picking up where you will start. Really, I mean, you have to. If you've never studied history, it's a good idea to just enjoy yourself. I'm going to have a drink, and then I'm going to change tack. I'm going to do some Australiana. Okay. That was that about history. I love it. I absolutely love it. But now we're going to go to Australia. I better do my computer's gone off again. I gotta do this. Let me see. Done. Okay, now we're going to do some Australian history, but what I would like to say about Australian history, that many years ago I taught Australian history unit to the year 9s about, this in the 80s, about what we call the invasion, and honestly, we made a lot of progress too with our Indigenous people. Because it was inevitable in a way. One must respect each other, but that invasion hasn't stopped since 1788, since Captain Arthur Phillip arrived. Because when you think about Captain Cook, he came to Australia, yes, but they didn't settle it. And before him, the Dutch arrived; they didn't settle it either. And then before him, also some of the people from Europe, some monks apparently, arrived in the 1400s. Marco Polo from China probably sailed with towards this part of the world, and we have found evidence in the northwest of Australia of the Chinese visiting Australia, and they also visited South America, and a lot of the Pacific, but they did not settle it. In other words, none of the earlier explorers settled, invaded the people who were living here already, or who lived in North America or in Central America. This is part of the movement of men and women around the world. So when we discover something for ourselves, that doesn't mean that other people don't know about it. It just means that you went there first, and as a result of your invasion, take Christopher Columbus, had a big impact on, and he didn't even go to mainland USA or South America. He arrived in El Salvador. So there we are. You've got to think about this world in a different way now, because we are doing world history, and it's important that we appreciate this. Now, how do we know about life before the invasion? How do we know about the Aborigines? Okay, the Aborigines themselves, or the indigenous, I like to call them indigenous people, have no written history, no books. Their memories are passed on in songs, stories and paintings. Legends sometimes describe events which happened thousands of years ago. For example, one tells of a time when Port Phillip Bay was dry land, and others describe the eruptions of volcanoes, and we know both these things happened. But Indigenous history does not tell us everything, and it gives us no dates. So we have to use other ways of finding out about the past of these Australians. Some things we can work out because we have found some of the tools and paintings which were made. Other things we know because people in some areas, the dry inland or far north, did not change their way of life much even after the invasion because of the heat, etc. White people from Europe settled in other parts of the country which had a climate more suitable to them and left these other areas alone. Sometimes, again, we're talking about Europeans, men or women, were allowed to live with northern or desert indigenous people, to watch their daily life and listen to their stories, but not to know the secret ceremonies and places. So in other words, they kept it to themselves. Well, it's not, I don't know about that, but you've got to have evidence of these things. But the peoples who lived in coastal New South Wales and Victoria and Tasmania were nearly all killed or moved away from their own lands soon after the invasion, and little remains of their culture. So a lot more is known about the people of Northern Australia and Central Australia than about the people of Southern Australia. Now, one way of finding out about the Indigenous history is through work of archaeologists. So if you want to find out more about the early part of Australia, there we go. Now, when you're digging, you will find the tools, the stone tools, the shells, whatever was used, the pottery. The lowest levels of these mounds are the earliest, and by using radiocarbon dating and other scientific methods, archaeologists can discover what sort of food people ate, what sort of tools they used at certain times in history, and how long the site was occupied. Okay, so that's basically it. I don't have much time, because what I want to do now, where do I put it? I want to read some. Where am I put my? Here we are. I want to do. I want to read. I want to read Banjo Patterson as an Australian writer. Everyone knows Banjo Patterson. One of his poems is called "The Road to Old Men's Town" by Banjo Patterson. But before that, can I read you? Oh, I have to do this. Can I read you my poem about Australia? And this is in the Lake Mungo region. This is the northern part of Mildura, and we'll be talking about the bones that were found in there years ago, and which carbon dating put it at between 40 and 60,000 years. So in the Lake Mungo regions, the bones of people, I wrote this about 30 years ago, in the bones of people living in the Lake Mungo region have been there for 60,000 years. The bones of people buried in the land in the sand dunes of the Lake Mungo region gives us a clue of the Aborigine story. In the sand dunes of the Lake Mungo region, there is a skeleton. I am a skeleton in the sand dunes of the Lake Mungo region. When my bones were full of flesh, I inhabited this land, drank from the waters, and listened to the stories of my ancestors from my elders. I hunted, gathered fruit and fished. I walked about with my group and saw lizards, emus and kangaroos. My friend Mawala painted in a cave our ancestor hero Bunjil and his dingoes. Mindai, the rainbow serpent, helped in the creation of our mountains and trees, of our flowers and water paths. We lived in our land awaiting the changes of weather. We lived with our people, knowing that Mother Earth would one day take us back into the sky world of our ancestors. We lived, we loved. I am now dead, so that you can see which Kulin once upon a time were owned by the lands of the Lake Mungo region. Now, I have this booklet here, which I produced, 2009, in which I have my poetry about Australia, and also I translated a few of the Australian poems. This one is called La Strada, The Road to Old Manstown by Banjo Patterson. The fields of youth are filled with flowers. The wine of youth is strong. What need have we to count the hours? The summer days are long. But soon we find to our dismay that we are drifting down the barren slopes that fall away towards the foothills grim and grey, that lead to Old Man's Town. And marching with us on the track, full many friends we find. We see them looking sadly back for those that drop behind. But God forbid a fate so dread, alone to travel down the dreary road we all must tread, with faltering steps and whitening head, the road to Old Man's Town. Isn't it beautiful? I actually translate this in Italian, and if you forgive me, for those people who don't speak Italian, let me read it. La strada per il paese del vecchio di Banjo Patterson. And I translate this in 2009. I campi della gioventù sono pieni di fiori, il vino della gioventù è forte, che bisogno abbiamo noi di contare le ore. I giorni d'estate sono lunghi, ma presto troviamo con nostro dispiacere che stiamo galleggiando in giù ai nudi pendii che cadono via verso i selvaggi e grigi piedi delle colline che dirigono verso il paese del vecchio. E camminando con noi sul sentiero pieno troviamo molti amici. Noi li vediamo guardare con tristezza indietro per quelli che caddero dietro. Ma il Dio proibisca un destino così pauroso di viaggiare solo per la triste strada che noi tutti dobbiamo calcare con passi esitanti e testa bianca, la strada per il paese del vecchio. I love that. Now, that leads me to what I promised I would do for Stephen Ross Ferraro, because I said to him, look, I could help out a little bit because I'm doing the songs, I'm doing the lyrics of songs, and he sings, etc. But I like to sing on my own without music, which we will do. But tonight I'm going to try something. And let me give you what I'm going to try. I'm going to play the first one first, and then I will ask you to do something for me. Here we go. Let me see. Okay. No, not yet. Next one. This one here. When I began to walk, because of the restrictions, etc., I walk more often these days. I was listening to songs, and one of the first singers that really caught my attention was Gigliola Cinquetti, famous for Non ho l'età. But this one here, this song here that I'm going to try now, is La Domenica Andando alla Messa. Of course, it's better sung by a young woman because the words themselves suit the young woman. But I'm interested in the lyrics, and I'm going to give them to you by singing it along in a nice, clear fashion, and see what happens. This is the sound of it, La Domenica Andando alla Messa. La domenica andando alla messa, accompagnata dai miei amatori, mi sorpresero i miei genitori, monachella mi fecero andar, oh sì sì, oh no, monachella mi fecero andar. Dimmi che mami, sono innocente come il sol che risplende sul mare. Voglio dare un addio all'amor, oi sì sì, oi no. Voglio dare un addio all'amor. Giovanotti, piangete, piangete, han tagliato i miei biondi capelli. Tu lo sai, eran ricci, eran belli, giovanotti piangete con me, oi sì sì, oi no. Giovanotti piangete con me. Dimmi che mami, sono innocente come il sol che risplende sul mare. Voglio dare un addio all'amor, oh sì sì, oh no. Voglio dare un addio all'amor, oh sì sì, oh no. Voglio dare un addio all'amor. Wow. And now, let's have a look. This is what I promised. Here we are. Now, this is the song, La Domenica Andando alla Messa. Now, if you're at home, we can go through the words. La Domenica Andando alla Messa, accompagnata dai miei amatori, mi sorpresero i miei genitori, monachella mi fecero andar, oi sì sì, oi no, monachella mi fecero andar. Dimmi che mami, sono innocente come il sol che risplende sul mare, voglio dare un addio all'amor, oi sì sì, oi no, voglio dare un addio all'amor. Giovanotti, piangete, piangete, han tagliato i miei biondi capelli, tu lo sai, eran ricci, eran belli, giovanotti, piangete con me, oi sì sì, oi no, giovanotti, piangete con me. Dimmi che mami, sono innocente come il sole, etc. So you can see what I try to do here, and if people, and this is what I say to Stephen, that I can, I can go through the words in this history program at the end of the hour, and then some of the songs you sing, even if you get one or two that people learn, it's still a good thing. So that's La Domenica Andando alla Messa. But let me tell you something. Let me go. There's another one here called Finché la barca va. I don't know whether you know this one. Okay? Finché la barca va. I'll just sing it here. Oh, well, I can't do it. I'll just do I will just do the words. Finché la barca va. Il grillo disse un giorno alla formica: il pane per l'inverno tu ce l'hai. Perché protesti sempre per il vino? Aspetta la vendemmia, ce l'avrai. Mi sembra di sentire mio fratello che aveva un grattacielo nel Perù. Voleva arrivare fino in cielo e il grattacielo adesso non l'ha più. Finché la barca va, lasciala andare. Finché la barca va, tu non remare. Finché la barca va, stai a guardare. Quando l'amore viene il campanello suonerà. Quando l'amore viene il campanello suonerà. And then, e tu che vivi sempre sotto il sole, la fila di ginestre e di lilla, a tuo paese c'è chi ti vuol bene, perché sogni le donne di città. Mi sembra di vedere mia sorella, che aveva un fidanzato di Cantù, voleva averne uno anche in Cina, e il fidanzato adesso non l'ha più. Finché la barca va, lasciala andare. Finché la barca va, tu non remare. Finché la barca va, stai a guardare. Quando l'amore viene il campanello suonerà. Quando l'amore viene il campanello suonerà. Stasera è suonato il campanello, è strano, io l'amore ce l'ho già. Vorrei aprire in fretta il mio cancello, mi fa morire la curiosità. Ma il grillo disse un giorno alla formica: il pane per l'inverno tu ce l'hai. Vorrei aprire in fretta il mio cancello, ma quel cancello io non apro mai. Finché la barca, etc. This is Orietta Berti singing this song, Finché la barca va. It's a very, very nice song. It's a beautiful song, and you know it's quite catchy too. So Stephen, this is a nice one to do. Orietta Berti is can be one of your friends. Got a lot of beautiful music. That lady there, and now we'll go to another one. This one here is Lacrima Napoletana. This is Neapolitan dialect. And Massimo Ranieri, very famous this song. This one here, let me see if I can get my computer a bit closer to me. Hoopla. Oh, gosh. Sorry, hold on. Just 1 second. Let me go back to me. I don't know. You can make comments, please, if you like, whilst I'm looking for my work. Here we are. Oh, gosh. Well, here we are. Okay, we got it now. Mia cara madre sta per trasì il Natale e sta lontano il fiume Sapamaro, come vorrei allumare 2 o 3 biancale, come vorrei sentire un zampo ignaro. E le ninne miei facitelo presepio e a tavola mettito piatto mio, facite quando a sera da vigilia, come se mienza a voi stesse pur io. E ce ne costa lacrima st'America, a noi napolitane, che a noi che ci chiamiamo cielo Napoli, come amare sto pane. Mia cara madre, che so è denaro, per chi si chiama patria non so niente, mo tengo qualche dollaro e mi pare che non sono stato mai tanto pezzente, ma sono tutta notte a casa mia. E dei creature miei ne sento la voce, ma voi vi son come Anna Maria è stata impiettanata, figlia in croce. E non ce ne costa lacrima sta America a noi napolitane, che noi che non ci chiamiamo cielo Napoli, come amaro sto pane. Ma avete scritto che a Sontolella chiama, chi l'ha lasciata e sta lontano ancora, che va già di se è figlia vonna a mamma, facitela tornare che è la signora. Ma no, non torno, me ne resto fuori e resto a faticare per tutto quanto. E saggi perso patria, casa, onore, i so carne e macelle, so emigranti. E non ce ne costa lacrima sta America a noi napolitana. Wow. Now, that's a Neapolitan song in the Neapolitan dialect. Of course, the dialect is actually a language as well. I used to call them dialects, now I call them languages. They are local languages and they are to be appreciated because, they're part and parcel of people's daily lives. It's very important that this is so. Now, there's another one here that I've got. That's another famous one. Stephen Ross Ferraro. I want people to listen to your beautiful music because you do such a good job. I watched you Tuesday night, and I'm going to introduce a lot of songs here that maybe some of these you don't know. Okay, this one here is a very nice one too. It's an old one from last century, early last century. And it's called Come t'ha fatta mamma. Quando mamma t'ha fatta, vuoi sapere come facette, vuoi sapere come facette, per impastare quelle belle carni, per impastare quelle belle carni, tutto quello che ci mise, tutto quello. No, that's not right. It's this one here. No wonder. See, I've got problems with the computer, and I'm trying to read, but you can see it, can't you? Quando mamma t'ha fatta, vuoi sapere come facette, per impastare sti carne bella, tutto quello che mettette, 100 rose incappucciate dintre la martola mischiata, latte e rose e latte, te facette un coppo fatto. Non c'è bisogno a zingara per divinare con c'è, come t'ha fatta mamma ta, o saccio meglio te. E per fa sta bocca bella, non servetta la stessa dose, Vuoi sapere che ci mettette, mo t'ho dico tutte cose, Nu panare chine, tutte fraule e giardine, miele, zucchero e cannella, tu impastai sta bocca bella. Non c'è bisogno a zingara per indovinare chi c'è, come t'ha fatta mamma ta, o saccio meglio te. E per fasti trezzatura, mamma toi s'appezzentette, bella mia tu qua moneta, vuoi sapere che non ci servette, una miniera sana, tutta fatta filigrana, e non ci volete per sti strezze, che a Vasà non c'è sta prezzo, non c'è bisogno. These songs deserve also a bit of explanation because they are part of Italy's culture, and the musicians here in Melbourne really keep on playing a lot of songs that they're popular, but unless you introduce a few of these occasionally, how are people going to know? Now, the other thing I would like to know from people who have followed me tonight is whether you would like me to do some, to go into Italian as well, teach a bit of Italian, just 1 or 2 points of grammar each week. And as you can see, I've dedicated about half an hour to the history lesson, and then another quarter of an hour to Australian history, and the last quarter of an hour I've dedicated to the songs. My iCloud, my computer, I access my information from iCloud. Obviously, it ran out, and I was able to just follow, read them to you, and sing them along. So maybe the fact that I had a problem tonight has given me a clue about the way I should move forward. And if you think you'd like to see the songs and sing them along with me, I'd love that. I really would love that. So it's 8:30. I've finished for another night. Thank you very much to all who have come in to watch. And don't forget, please pass the word around. Let's face it, education, knowledge, chi la vuole. It's not as popular as, live music, of course. But you can learn a lot from it, and I want to stir you to do something for yourselves. And viva la storia. Ok, from TomPadulaTV, buonanotte a tutti, ci vediamo prossimo giovedì. Ciao, arrivederci.